Hi, Pastor Greg here again with talking about Christmas and some of the things that go with it. Let's get to the big part here today. Let's talk about Santa Claus. Well, back about 300 AD, there was a man by the name of Saint Nicholas. Nicholas was born to wealthy parents, and at a young age, they died. He was about 17 when they died. And he went around the village and he gave away the wealth, and he became a monk and eventually a priest and eventually an archbishop. And he was known as a man of prayer. He was known as a man who loved Jesus Christ. He was known as a man who, through his prayers, would see people healed and saved. And he was just an incredible man. In fact, legends grew up around him. And one of the legends was that there was a family needing dowry. You know, the girls could not get married unless they had a dowry. And so they would were all weeping. Each girl was weeping, and supposedly he would come and throw some money through the window so that they could afford to get married. And where we get the stockings idea was there's one legend that it would end up in the stocking. He threw it one time, and these stockings were by the fireplace drying, and it went in. Again, we don't think that really happened, but that's where the legend came from. And so his charity, his love of the Lord, his love of Jesus Christ just enveloped who he was. So when he died on a December 6th, they began feasts in his honor. Christmas dinners. Got the idea here? So one of the things that happened with him was his legend went on and on and on. And there was a duke, or a duke who would eventually become king, and he adapted that. And so on Christmas, he would take his whole staff out, and they would go into the countryside. They would feed the poor, they would clothe the poor, they would help people in need. His castle would be made warm, so if anyone was cold, they could come in and eat and be safe. And we get a song called Good King Wenceslas went out on the feast of Stephen. And so we hear that song that you probably have sung or at least heard came from the idea of Santa Claus. Now, Santa Claus was actually banned. He was banned here in the United States. He was banned in England because Christmas, as I mentioned at another time, had kind of degenerated into kind of a Mardi Gras, Halloween, fighting, stealing, and so nobody wanted to do anything. And the Puritans, who came over to escape some of that, said, "We're not bringing that with us." And so it wasn't until we had a number of Dutch and German immigrants that Santa started coming. And his name was Sinterklaas. Well, the Americanized children with their form of English couldn't say Sinterklaas, so they said Santy Claus. And that's how we get the name. He started growing in popularity. One of the things that helped was there was a famous magazine named Harper's, and there was an illustrator who would illustrate the stories of Sinterklaas in it, and so it started again building up. And then we had that very famous poem, "'Twas a Night Before Christmas," and that really set things going in the 1800s or the 19th century, whatever you want to call it. And that really started getting things going. Well, we began seeing the transformation where Santa Claus would come and bring toys and whatnot, but there was a lot of poverty. So a lot of people didn't believe in Santa Claus because they didn't get anything. So we have that famous article that went to that newspaper. Yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus, and you can look that up and read that on your own. Well, how did he turn red? Thank Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola made him red for their billboards because they thought it looked better. So that's where Santa Claus came from. But what about a Christian? Should a Christian do anything with Santa Claus? Well, first of all, Santa Claus in the history was always tied in some way to Jesus Christ. In fact, when he would travel in some of the history with the Christ child. He was viewed as the helper to Christ, as the servant of Christ. I think that's a pretty good thing to remember. That the original Saint Nick was a man who served and loved Jesus Christ and tried to live as Christ would have him live. This Christmas, are you reflecting Jesus Christ to the world around you? I hope you are. That's a good way to act a little bit like Santa, but more importantly, to act like Christ. Have a great one.